gosh, I love this movie. Hey Maddie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is playing on TV right now. You should check it out.
It would not be made out of gold.
That's the cup of a carpenter. There's only one way to find out.
You have chosen wisely.
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite scene. It kind of reminds me of Act 3, Scene 2, between Bassiano and Portia, and William Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. Isn't that the scene we have to perform for our Shakespeare project?
Yeah, you're totally right. Now you mention it, I don't think I know much about Shakespeare except for the fact that he wrote The Merchant of Venice. Do you know anything else about him?
William Shakespeare was born on April 23, 1564, to a middle-class family in an English market town called Stratford-upon-Avon. There, his father, John Shakespeare, worked as a glovemaker and town politician. Shakespeare was the third of 8 children born to his parents, but the first to survive infancy. He was baptized 3 days after his birth on April 26 at the Church of the Holy Trinity. As a young boy, Shakespeare attended the town's grammar school, where he studied Latin grammar during the early years, then progressed to the study of logic, rhetoric, composition, and Roman literature. In 1582, at the age of 18, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway, the 26-year-old daughter of a farmer from a nearby village. Together, William and Anne had 3 children named Susanna, Hamnet, and Judith.
Shakespeare began his literary career by writing poems, specifically sonnets. He then continued to write a multitude of plays and perform with an acting troupe known as the Lord Chamberlain's Men. He died on the same day of his birth, April 23rd, in 1616, at the age of 51. His 37 known plays continued to be read, studied, performed, and watched by people to this day.
One of William Shakespeare's most controversial plays is the comedy The Merchant of Venice. Shakespeare wrote the play in 1596. The earliest recorded performance of the play was held in the court of King James in the spring of 1605 at Whitehall Palace. The king and his court then watched a second performance of the same play only 2 days later. After this, however, there are no further records of the play being performed until the 18th century. There is not a definitive motivation for the creation of Merchant of Venice either.
The play is known to be anti-Semitic and is widely debated as to why Shakespeare would write such a controversial play. Some believe it was because he himself was anti-Semitic, but others agree that he only wrote the play to display the mistreatment of Jews at the time. What we do know is that Jews, in general, were a topic of interest in the Elizabethan era. Jews in Shakespeare's England were a marginalized group and were often portrayed as villains and objects of mockery. A play written by Christopher Marlowe shortly before The Merchant of Venice, called The Jew of Malta, had a similar anti-Semitic testament, and some believe that Shakespeare might have used this play to draw upon for his own play. Despite the questionable portrayals of Jews in the play, the story continues to be recreated in the 21st century. Several TV and movie and even opera adaptations of the play have been created for entertainment, the most recent being a 2018 BBC broadcast that attempts to bring the 16th century play into a more modern setting. The Merchant of Venice is also widely referenced and quoted in pop culture. Lines from the play can be found in Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List and in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Shylock is one of the most famous and memorable characters of The Merchant of Venice, and is frequently mentioned and quoted today. Shylock is a wealthy Jewish moneylender in the city of Venice. He is portrayed as malicious and greedy, but he is later revealed to have quite humble intentions. Shylock is often mistreated and mistrusted by the other Christian characters of the play, especially by Antonio. Antonio is a merchant with many international trading enterprises. He does not have much physical money, however, so when his friend Bassanio asks him to help him get a loan, his only choice is to use a pound of flesh as collateral. Although this seems a little harsh, it makes sense because Shylock is the one backing the loan. Bassanio doesn't seem to care about the high wager, however, because he is certain that he will make the money back before the loan expires. Bassanio is an ineffectual businessman who needs money to properly win over Portia and receive her hand in marriage. Portia is a wealthy heiress from Belmont. Her beauty draws suitors from far lands, but she has not yet been married thanks to a clause in her father's will that forces her to marry whichever suitor chooses the correct of 3 boxes.
Bassanio, awed by Portia, travels to Belmont with his friend Gratiano. He hopes to use Shylock's loan to marry Portia. Upon his arrival at the palace, Portia falls head over heels in love with Bassanio. She explains to him how he will be able to receive her hand in marriage. Perceivably, it is simple. All he has to do is choose the correct of 3 boxes, 1 gold, 1 silver, and 1 lead. Portia begs Bassanio to wait to choose for a day or 2 because if he chooses incorrectly, he will have to leave forever. Bassanio refuses and goes to make his decision immediately. This brings us to Act 3, Scene 2, where we will be performing the continuation of these events.
Now he goes, with no less presence, but with much more love than Alcides when he did redeem the virgin tribute paid by howling Troy to the sea monster. I stand for sacrifice. Live thou, I live with much, much more dismay. I view the fight than thou that makest the fray.
Thou gaudy gold, hard food for Midas, I will none of thee. Nor none of thee, thou pale and common drudge, 'tween man and man. But thou meager lead, and here choose I, joy be the consequence. What find I here? Fair Portia's counterfeit? What demigod hath come so near creation? Move these eyes. Here are severed lips, parted with sugar breath. So sweet a bar should sunder such sweet friends. Here's the scroll, the continent and summary of my fortune. You that choose not by the view, chance as fair and choose as true. Since this fortune falls to you, be content and seek no new. If you be well pleased with this, and hold your fortune for your bliss, turn you where your lady is, and claim her with a loving kiss. A gentle scroll. Fair lady, by your leave, I come by note to give and to receive. Whether these pearls of praise be his or no, so thrice, fair lady, stand I even so. As doubtful whether what I see be true, until confirmed, signed, ratified by you.
You see me, my lord Bassanio, where I stand, such as I am. Though for myself alone, I would not be ambitious in my wish, to wish myself much better. These house, the servants, and the same myself are yours, my lord. I give them with this ring, which when you part from, lose, or give away, let it presage the ruin of your love, and be my vantage to exclaim on you. After this section of the play ends, the mood changes quickly. Bassiano is notified that Antonio has lost all of his trading ships, and Shylock plans to obtain a pound of his flesh. Bassiano then rushes to Venice in order to help his friend. At the same time, Shylock is putting the bankrupt Antonio into jail. Shylock refuses to listen to Antonio's pleas, and he shows no mercy because Antonio is discriminated against him on multiple accounts in the past. Since Venice has a good reputation for supporting the law, Antonio believes the Duke will not break the law or else the city's economy would suffer. Back in Belmont, Lorenzo tells Portia how deserving Antonio is of her help. Because Bassiano and Antonio are so close, Portia considers saving Antonio equally important as saving her own husband. Portia then states that she and Nerissa are going to pray at the monastery, but they actually are going to dress up as men and travel to Antonio's trial in Venice. When the court convenes in Venice, the Duke shows pity for Antonio.
The Duke believes that Shylock is just playing around and could not actually inflict the penalty on Antonio. However, Shylock is being completely truthful and says that his hate for Antonio is reason enough for this harsh punishment. Bassanio then arrives and tries to talk Shylock down. Shylock refuses every offer of money that Bassanio suggests. There is then news of a letter from Dr. Bellario, the lawyer that was supposed to decide on the matter. He sends Portia, disguised as a young male lawyer, with her clerk Nerissa instead because he is sick. Portia starts to tell Shylock that he must be merciful to Antonio, but Shylock just reiterates that he wants justice and revenge. After Bassanio pleads with Shylock to take either his money or his life, Portia states the bond is legal and binding. Bassanio and Gratiano say their goodbyes before Portia tells Shylock he will have his pound of flesh or nothing.
She explains to Shylock that the bond only states that he can have a pound of flesh, but if he spills a drop of blood, then he will be charged for attempted murder. Shylock suddenly stops his advance toward Antonio. He is then reminded by Portia that there is a penalty for threatening the life of a Venetian. Half of Shylock's property should go to the state and the other half should go to Antonio. The Duke spares Shylock's life and Antonio returns his share on one condition. Shylock must convert to Christianity and give everything he owns to his daughter Jessica when he dies. Shylock agrees and leaves quickly. After the trial, Bassanio and Graciano give their rings to the lawyer and clerk as payment for saving Antonio. Portia and Nerissa then return to Belmont before their husbands do.
They are greeted with music and wait for the men to arrive. When Bassanio and Gratiano reach Portia's home, they have to apologize to Portia and Nerissa for giving away the rings that they were never supposed to give away. The women continue to tease them for a little while until they finally reveal that they were the lawyer and the clerk. Antonio also receives news that his trading ships, that were thought to be lost at sea, have arrived in the port. Everyone ends up happily ever after.
The scene we performed was important because it brought the drama around the caskets to an end. It shows that Bassanio is worthy enough to marry Portia and that he has approval of her father as well. Bassanio's greatness shines through because he is wise enough not to be deceived by the gold and silver caskets. This scene also emphasizes Bassanio's true love for Portia. He chooses the lead casket because he is not marrying for her riches and he does not judge by appearances. In relation to the rest of the play, this scene brings the pieces together. Bassanio and Portia get married, which leads to Nerissa and Graciano getting married also.
Because Bassanio and Portia become married, they decide to share everything with each other. Then Portia's side of the story connects with Antonio's when Bassanio shares Antonio's problems with Portia and she decides to take action.
There are many themes displayed throughout The Merchant of Venice. Justice and mercy are significant components of the trial scene. Portia's view of mercy comes from the New Testament, which encourages Christians to turn the other way. On the other hand, Shylock believes the complete opposite. He believes justice means an eye for an eye. Later on, however, Portia is not merciful when Shylock loses. She does not let him back out of the deal.
Love and hate are also some major themes in the play. The friendship between Antonio and Bassanio is so strong that they would give up their lives for each other. Love and a marriage can be seen between Portia and Bassanio and Nerissa and Gratiano. Nonetheless, the play is full of hatred between Christians and Jews. This hatred can be seen at every level of society. The themes of appearance and reality show up when Portia and Nerissa dress up as the lawyer and the clerk. They use this disguise to deceive and test the trust of their husbands. The issue of value and worth occur when human life is compared to money. The women in the play are not treated as people by the men. For example, Shylock describes the loss of his daughter Jessica as a loss of valuable money. Portia's father considered Portia as an object he possessed when he included her in his will. Overall, the themes in The Merchant of Venice help us understand the characters and their intentions more thoroughly.
The Merchant of Venice is one of the most frequently produced of Shakespeare's plays and is highly regarded among Shakespearean critics and historians. Despite the high acclaim, it seems that the anti-Semitism in the play is all that professionals want to talk about. Some believe that the negative message comes from pure intent or is just a product of its time, but others argue that it is a direct and intentional attack on Jews. The literary critic Harold Bloom confirms the former opinion when he stated in his book, "One would have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to recognize that Shakespeare's grand equivocal comedy, The Merchant of Venice, is nevertheless a profoundly anti-Semitic work."
Lawrence Wright, an American historical analyst and author, argues that less focus should be put on this schism and more on the literary sophistication of The Merchant of Venice. He states that contemporary criticism seldom acknowledges Shakespeare's sensitivity to longer-term historical trajectories, and argues accordingly that Shakespeare's drama anticipates the rise of large-scale cosmopolitan society and, without underestimating the social tensions involved, challenges the audience to welcome an unknown new world appearing over the horizon.
Personally, I enjoyed the play. It is not a very complex play, but it has a clear storyline with only a few subplots. I appreciate how Shakespeare is able to create a sense of increasing tension and urgency throughout the plot. It causes me to become invested into the outcome of the conflict. Compared to some of Shakespeare's other plays, such as Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth, there is minimal death and violence, as well as fewer significant characters. I think that this was helpful in following the characters and their relationships with others in the play.
Ultimately, I think The Merchant of Venice is a well-written play. It is entertaining and it has an understandable plotline. I liked how it was much calmer in comparison to other works by Shakespeare. There were no deaths and it had a happy ending. I also appreciated how strong of a relationship Bassanio and Antonio had. Nevertheless, I did not like how anti-Semitic it was toward Shylock and Jessica. Besides the anti-Semitism, I believe that The Merchant of Venice was a well thought out play by William Shakespeare.